Prime Minister Orban, Victor, welcome to Jerusalem again. You were here in Israel in July of 2018. Since then, I want you to know that Prime Minister Orban and I meet almost on a regular basis. We met in Brasilia. We met in Warsaw. We're meeting here. And every opportunity that we meet, we take on the task of fortifying even further the excellent relations between Hungary and Israel. They are growing in every direction, economically, in terms of security, diplomatically. I have to commend you for taking on the effort, and your foreign minister for confronting the lies that are put forward against Israel in places like the Human Rights Committee, in EU forums and elsewhere. You stand up for Israel and you stand up for the truth, and I want to thank you for it. It is a very important alliance. I recall my visit to Hungary last summer. I was deeply impressed by your country and the development that is taking place there. And I also appreciate the opportunity to visit places that have great importance to the history of the Jewish people and the Jewish state, namely the birthplace of Theodor Herzl, without whose leadership we would not be here today.
So,
greetings, Mr. Orban.
Mr. Orban, how do you do?
Thank you.
The youth movement has arrived from Belgium. And,
nice to see you. How are you?
Nice to meet you, Mr.
Mr. Orban, how are you?
Nice to meet you, Mr. Orban.
Good to see you. That is the Belgian delegation, yeah?
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to see you.
a Flemish, actually. A
Flemish.
The
Flemish.
northern
So they
part.
call themselves Flemish.
Flemish
Yeah, I
delegation.
know where it is, of course.
Belangrijk omwille van het feit dat de jeugd de toekomst is. De jeugd is de toekomst en de jeugd is samen met het Vlaams Belang van oordeel dat we maar één ding moeten doen. In deze stad, maar in heel Vlaanderen. Dat is baas blijven in ons eigen land. Ervoor zorgen dat wij het voor het zeggen hebben en niemand anders. En dat al die linkse, maar ook islamitische, Marokkaanse, Arabische en andere ratten hun makken rollen.
Ik dacht, deze kan niet, dat is in de verborgen camera. Je moet toch te zot voor woorden zijn. Dat is zo'n uitschot, zo'n krapul, dat alles verwerpt waar wij voor staan. Dat vertrokken is naar Ginder om gruweldaden te plegen, mensen de keel over te snijden, homoseksuelen van gebouwen te gooien, dat wij die zouden terugbrengen. Je zit te zot voor woorden. Ze zijn vertrokken, ze mogen er blijven. Vooral dat krapul en dat extremistisch uitschot heb ik maar één boodschap. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye!
It was very nice to hear the emphasis on family values.
You know, it's a kind of combination of politics and entertaining business.
Yes, very good, very good.
Show business, you know, so it's still traditional form of politics.
Yes.
And anybody can ask anything. Sit
Yeah.
down and it's basic. That's what we call
And they want to-
basic democracy, yeah.
Exactly.
it's,
And we are regarded non-democrats, but it's crazy.
It's crazy indeed.
We
Yes.
are constantly in dialogue with
You're
them.
being told
That there will be a V4 meeting here with the government of Israel. It's proved to be almost successful. That was a first attempt, which is promising. I hope we will be able to complete that mission later on.
Would you say to all these Belgians who think that multiculturalism and this invasion, this migration invasion, is a fact that they cannot change?
Is it possible?
May I be direct and honest?
You can, of course.
Finally, every nation got what they deserve. So awaken as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will be in trouble.
We are trying to awake
So
awake
it's,
the
you
rest.
know, tendencies which are going on. It's not just unpleasant, not just inconvenient, but changing dramatically at the basis
Yes.
of our civilization. So if you are not awakened in the proper time, Belgium will be different in 5 or 10 years' time. So it's about your future. It's not our future. We would not like to give any advice because you know we are strictly respect national sovereignty. It's your
Yes.
future, but It's in your hand. Do something.
In the speech I gave at the festival, I said that we have to be the strongest generation in Western Europe, or we will be the last. But
Stand up and fight.
it was very great to find inspiration here, because we see a lot of good things happening in Central Eastern Europe. We can learn a lot from that in the West.
It's complicated. You are rich anyway. Belgium is a rich country. Economy is working, but the basis of
Soccer
the
is
society,
good.
soccer
But we
is
have-
even better than it
I'm
was.
afraid that the worst thing in the West is that we have lost family values. Like the women and the families are not having children anymore because they don't see a future. They only think about themselves, and we are trying to change that too.
What I regularly got as opinion from Belgium and from other countries, saying that we can't change, it's impossible. Simply don't believe it. It's democracy.
Yes.
It depends on what you want. If you would like to change, change it. Stand up and fight.
I realized that we had probably pulled the wool over the American people's eyes. One of the things that disturbs me most about this is that the same tactics are being used as were used in 2002 and early 2003 with regard to Iraq. The same people, the same tactics, the same litany, the same strategy, the same everything. And yet there seems to be, as Gore Vidal called the American people, we are the United States of amnesia. There seems to be no reasonable attitude out there about this, that, hey, we've seen this before. We do not need to do this again. We've been at war for 17 years now, but that's the problem we have in this country.
Fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
This decision in 2003 to invade Iraq was, will be, ever interpreted by historians as a catastrophic strategic mistake. What we did when we invaded Iraq was violate 40+ years of U.S. foreign and security policy. We destroyed the balance of power in the Persian Gulf. And we started what is going on now and probably will be going on for years to come, this massive chaos, killing, death, starvation, states failing and so forth, Syria, Libya, Iraq, and possibly Lebanon, maybe Jordan. What we have is chaos, and we produce that chaos. Just as sure as we produced the chaos, we produced ISIS. We produced all of this by that really unwise decision in 2003 to invade Iraq. As a young man, 21 years old, I went to war in Vietnam. I went to a war that was built on lies. As an older man, I was chief of staff at the State Department and watched another war unfold, built on lies, the war with Iraq. Now we are getting ready to go to war with another country, Iran, on another house of lies. We need to prevent that.
Ladies and gentlemen, one cold day in the late 19th century, my grandfather, Nathan, and his younger brother, Judah, were standing in a railway station in the heart of Europe. They were seen by a group of anti-Semitic hoodlums. Thank you. Mr. Vice President, first let me say that you spoke exceptionally movingly today, both in the substance and the depth of feeling that you conveyed. And it was in a universal expression of a firm moral stance to translate memory into action, and you are translating into action. President Trump and you are standing against the worst manifestation of anti-Semitism, and that is the call of Iran to wipe out the 6 million and more Jews of Israel. You spoke about it clearly today, and you act clearly every day. So I want to express my congratulations to you for coming here, for what you said, and for what you and what President Trump and your administration is doing every single day on behalf of Israel's security. We have had no better friend than President Trump. That friendship is expressed in the fact that we're in the American embassy in Jerusalem, that Jerusalem was recognized by President Trump as Israel's capital, that President Trump has recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights. And now, with this invitation, I think that the President is seeking to give Israel peace and security, the peace and security that it deserves. So I gladly accept your invitation, his invitation, to come to Washington and discuss with him his ideas on how to advance peace and to work closely with him to advance that goal. I suggested that Benny Gantz be invited to this event as well, because I think that it's important that we do not lose this historic opportunity. With such friends in the White House, with such backing from the United States, we should get as broad a consensus as possible around the efforts to achieve security and peace and security for the State of Israel.
Yesterday, I was also pleased to host leaders for a discussion about an ironclad American commitment protecting religious leaders and also protecting religious freedom. This fundamental right is under growing threat around the world. Hard to believe, but 80% of the world's population lives in countries where religious liberty is in significant danger.
En dat al die linkse, maar ook islamitische, Marokkaanse, Arabische en andere ratten hun ratten rollen.
Beste vrienden, 5 jaar deze N-VA-regering en er is niets veranderd. We betalen de hoogste belastingen voor de laagste pensioenen. U mag er alleen nog eens 2 jaar langer voor werken. En immens kostenplaatje. Ik ga niet doodslagen met cijfers. Maar de leeflonen zijn verzesvoudigd tot 260 miljoen enkel alleen door vluchtelingen. Dan word ik daar kwaad van. Ik dacht, deze kan niet. Dat is in verborgen camera. Je moet toch te zot voor woorden zijn. Dat is zo'n uitschot, zo'n krapul, dat alles verwerpt waar wij voor staan. Dat vertrokken is naar kinderen om gruweldaden te plegen, mensen de keel over te snijden, homoseksuelen van gebouwen te gooien, dat wij die zouden terugbrengen. Die zijn te zot voor woorden. Ze zijn vertrokken, ze mogen er blijven. Vooral dat krapul en extremistisch uitschot. Heb ik maar één boodschap. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye!
Because I'd been through the Pentagon right after 9/11. About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq. My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition, it is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force for months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext, I think that's the only word, for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Somalia.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by one. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somalian organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region. It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran.
And discuss with him his ideas on how to advance peace and to work closely with him to advance that goal. I suggested that Benny Gantz be invited to this event as well, because I think that it's important that we do not lose this historic opportunity.
For far too long, all the way back to 1979 to be exact, nations have tolerated Iran's destructive and destabilizing behavior in the Middle East and beyond. Their pursuit of nuclear weapons threatens the civilized world. Last week, we took decisive action to stop a ruthless terrorist from threatening American lives. In recent days, he was planning new attacks on American targets, but we stopped him. Iran's hostilities substantially increased after the foolish Iran nuclear deal was signed in 2013. And they were given $150 billion, not to mention $1.8 billion in cash. Then Iran went on a terror spree, funded by the money from the deal. The missiles fired last night at us and our allies were paid for with the funds made available by the last administration. The very defective JCPOA expires shortly anyway,
and gives Iran a clear and quick path to nuclear breakout. The time has come for the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Russia, and China to recognize this reality. Over the last 3 years, under my leadership, our economy is stronger than ever before. America has achieved energy independence. The American military has been completely rebuilt under my administration. After destroying 100% of ISIS and its territorial caliphate.